the present value of the loans booked is a little under 2%, about 1.5%. So essentially what that would say is at $2.5 million, the present value, if it had 25% utilization, is 1.5% of the face value of that. Okay? So if you only booked 500, 600,000, our cost of acquisition is 5%. So to have that 2-to-1 multiple that we talked about, you'd need the present value of that 600,000 to be 10% of the face value. In effect, what you'd have to do is take our pricing and triple it, the spread, and triple it to get to a present value like that. Anyone think you could triple the price of the loans and go out and sell them today? The reality is you have to ground this in some kind of, you have to be rational when you do this. And you have to say, geez, can we go out and sell if the pricing was this? And what you'll see is that 75% utilization, you could actually lower the goal. You're covering your costs at about $1.6 million because you're getting 75% utilization. See, 2% cost of acquisition, 4% present value, about $1.7 million. What that essentially says is, hey, if we paid you on economic value, you make up your own goals. We just say, hey, here's the deal. You're going to get a base salary. This is how much value you have to generate to cover your base salary. How you go about doing that, ideally you'd book high utilization deals. But it's maybe not realistic to think you're going to book all loans. So in developing the goals, we just use the 50% utilization because it works out. We get average utilization on lines of credit of 39%. And of course, loans, we get 100% on the first day, but it's got a declining balance over the life of the loan. So 50% was a good working number. One thing to remember when you look at this and you start thinking economic value, remember we've got $300 million in prime lines on the books today with zero utilization that we paid CLOs to book. So to anyone who booked all those lines, I would say your days are numbered. To people who are booking good business that customers are using, I would say this is very good news. This whole presentation should be really good news to those of you who book good business, to people that will use it, that want to bank with Wells Fargo, that want to be longtime customers. This is very good news. So anyway, what you'll see is that a $2.5 million, 50% utilization is right about the intersection of that line. So to cover your costs is about $2.5 million. $3 million makes the business a competitive investment opportunity, so we split the difference. On the one hand, you could argue for $3 million. On the other hand, you could argue for $2 million to cover your cost. But instead, it's $2.5 million. And it's a pretty good proxy to satisfy the goals that we had to hit as a business, to bring CLOs in and say, this is the baseline. Okay? Remember the reading list. There's a lot more on this, and those of you in Southern California would be happy to talk a lot about this. This, to me, this whole issue of acquisition ratio, I'm telling you, was the most confusing part for me. It was the most difficult thing to understand, this whole issue of relative value and investment, and the whole issue is we just have to be competitive, and we have to cover our costs, and we're doing it, but we can do better. So if growing NIAC increases shareholder value, if creating NIAC increases shareholder value, why do we have to grow? Well, one reason is, if you remember the NIAC analogy, if the cash flow streams stay flat, the stock price won't move because it's already impounded into the share price. So if you just left it alone and produced income at current levels, you'd look a lot like a bond, right? You don't get any capital appreciation. It just throws off income. Shareholder value is the present value of those cash flows, and only increases in those cash flows will get the share price to rise. There's actually a formula. There's a storm on the horizon, and I'll tell you what that storm is in a second. We have done a really good job in being efficient. Examples are, we took a process that had 17 handoffs and took it down to 2. We have CLOs today at an average of 12 million, where in '93 we had people averaging 1 million a year. So the internal efficiencies that we've been able to achieve have been mind-boggling. How can you grow the bottom line faster than the top line? Essentially, what I should have had on here were 2 graphics. One of a great big fat guy over here and one of a really skinny guy over here, because what happened was we took the fat guy and turned him into a skinny guy. And we chopped all the fat out of this business. The way you can grow the bottom line faster than the top line is about 4 ways. One is you can restructure, offload unprofitable customers or unprofitable businesses. You can consolidate excess capacity, and that's been the story of our industry. You can get productivity gains. You can re-engineer processes, and we have been living that constantly for the past several years. Technological advances. Moore's Law, right? Computing power doubles every 18 months. and the relative cost of that power goes down by 35% over that same period of time. So you're getting big boosts in power, and it's a lower cost. So we'll continue to get efficiency gains because of that. Falling interest rates. It has been a very kind environment for corporations in America. Low interest. They can get cheap money from the capital markets, and you can buy back stock to boost your earnings per share. But these boosts provided by the internal efficiencies only go so far, because you have to stop at zero. If you're cutting expenses, you stop at zero. If you're taking steps out of a process, you stop at zero, and we're down to pretty near zero now. So you can't shrink your way to greatness. I mean, that's the moral of the story. We have to grow the business. One example of that, it's in there, is Wells arithmetic. And what this shows is, if our goal is to grow profits by 15% per year. If we can do that, particularly if we can grow NIAC by 15% per year, we'll get huge boosts in the stock price. And we'll just be a really good business. I mean, the whole issue of job security is one that I like to talk about, because when you're creating value, you can sit back and say, I don't have a whole lot to worry about, really. So when you look at this, what it shows are trade-offs. One example is, if we just continued over the next 5 years to cut expenses by 10% per year and had no growth in revenues, we would only grow profits by 5.7% over that same period of time. Now, by contrast, we could be a little sloppy and grow expenses by 10% per year. We went in for budget this year for 4%, and that's going to get cut a little bit. But, for example, if we had gone in for 2.5 times that and somehow got 10% growth in expenses, and if we could grow revenues by 15%, we'd still grow profits by 18%. So the whole thing I want you to take away from this slide is, if we can grow revenues by acquiring profitable customers, that's the way to do it. You can't shrink your way to big growth in profits over the long term. Okay? So things to do and questions to ask. I hope there are a lot, because this is what you're going to see over and over and over again. And what we hope to do today was really familiarize you with what drives this business, the measurement systems that the executive office have. I got goals this year, and you're getting goals that are going to be very similar to this. We're rolling out a model for you that actually Don built to work up NIAC scenarios. So you can take loans you're doing today and see what kind of value you're creating. And what you can do is go in there and remember these ratios we talked about of 2 and 3 to 1, the acquisition cost. So if you go in and look at the net present value of a loan that you're doing, and it's $10,000, and you're getting paid $3,000, you look at that and go, hey, I'm a pretty good deal for the bank. But when you start going in and playing and tweaking it, and there's some scenarios in your binder, and start cutting price, and you'll start to see the net present value start dropping, but because we pay on commitments, you'll start to see that you can take a loan and tweak it and make it a very bad deal for the bank. We've provided you with a couple of handouts on EVA and an MVA reading list, and we've compiled websites for you to go and click and take your own time. So look for ways to create value. It really does pay. This is the model. There are 4 examples, and it talks about the tweaks that you can make to that. There's actually the actual output. So before you see the model, which is going to roll out in CLO Toolbox, you can see by changing different variables what it does to the actual value of a loan. It's a fun thing to look at. So just look at those 4. They're in there. You don't even have to have the model to see these. And this is the reading list and the websites. Do we have any more time? Whew. Man. Okay. With that, it's open to questions. Yeah. 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 Well, Norwest, as I understand it, they do give profitability-based goals now, based on their proxies for profitability. I can't speak to that because I don't work at Norwest yet, never did. For us, in terms of rolling out profitability-based goals, or actually value-based goals, because we'll just agree that when we talk about profits, we're talking about profits that have NIAC, right? The whole issue is we just got to the point. I mean, Colleen has been working feverishly, as Don can tell you, because he does a lot of work on this, to actually get it to the point that we understand our own profitability and the